Welcome to Factorio Friday Facts. My name is Nilaus, and this is a review and analysis video of Friday Factorio Facts. I'm covering 382 and 383 in this episode. So if you like these review videos, leave a comment below or hit the like button, leave a comment. If there's something that you have questions about how it's going to work, then maybe we can figure it out together. Maybe it's something I have answered. Maybe it's something we should post that question back into the ether, and hopefully they will respond in a future Friday Facts. So we're going to start with 382, and this one is about logistics groups. But first, there are a few clarifications about how the space platforms work. Because the space platforms are self-expanding, there are no robots in space, so things sort of build itself. Interesting. And that means this expansion or the platform has to expand itself. It looks really cool. I have a little concern, but that's not as a gamer, that's as a YouTuber live streamer, that all these small shades of gray textures here are going to be absolute nightmare for the bitrate, for just compression. YouTube compression is going to hate this part. But you know, it is what it is. We'll have to sort that out. And it's not really a gamer concern. So what are the things that they are mentioning? Well, the thing that they are mentioning here is about rockets, rocket launches. Rocket launches are cheaper now by a factor of 20. So instead of 1,000 rocket components, then it is only 50 rocket components. And then on top of that, you add productivity, you add quality, and well, it's going to be really cheap to launch rockets. That means we're going to see a lot of rockets launching all over the place. And that's going to be super amazing, because that's kind of what this expansion is about. Just launching rockets, interacting between the different layers on the ground and in orbit. So super cool. Another thing they clarified is about the rocket controllers. They're gone. Poof. Thank you. They're annoying. And instead, we just use blue circuits instead. So it's slightly cheaper, but still an annoying component to put into the rocket. But you know, if it's only 50, then it's not a big deal. Another thing that they're also clarifying is about the lack of no holes. And I was sort of hypothesizing about it, and they sort of confirmed it in this Friday Fact, that they don't want to sort of build a platform and then remove all this empty spaces so that you have a lighter platform when moving, because that's what we would do. We would just have a platform that was full of holes. Anywhere there wasn't belts, it would be full of holes. And they probably looked at it and go like, yeah, this is against the idea, because adding a algorithm to sort of check if there are holes and make sure that you can't sort of accidentally make holes in it is probably a little bit complicated and something that needs testing. So they didn't do it just for the hell of it. They did it because of a good reason, and the reason was that they didn't want sort of a patchwork of just scattered things and sort of discontinuous in rocket platforms. They wanted like one platform, and I think that makes sense. So now I get why they did it, and there was a good reason, as we expected. Another really big part here is the rocket carrying capacity. So now rockets are cheaper, but how much can they carry? That's one of the questions we also posed last time, like how much can a rocket carry? And the answer is 1,000 kilos. And then we go, what? Kilos? Weight? What? Are we adding weight now? And yes, apparently they are adding weight. I think it's super surprising. I would have expected they would go like 10 stacks of whatever. And they might go make some adjustments to some of the stack sizes, like nuclear power plants shouldn't stack to 50. They might only stack to 1, and then just be like, that's just the way it is. And then it's kind of how the balance would work. Aside from that, it doesn't really matter. Like stack sizes, you can adapt a few of the stack sizes that are still like really off, like, you know, nuclear power plants comes to mind. But in general, I thought they would do that. But they're adding weight, and that means we now have to sort of consider the weight of every unit. That means there'll be some things that are cheaper to bring as raw materials, and some things that are cheaper to process and then bring. Most likely it's cheaper to process and then bring things up, and that's going to be another thing we manage as well. It also means that every single modded item, every single modded building, all of these things have to actually have a weight. So there's a lot of work for all the modders with all the items now have to add a weight as well, or have a 0 weight. So how do we fill these rockets? Well, we fill them up. There are some inventory slots, and we can fill them up manually up to the weight capacity, and then launch it to space. Or we can travel as well, or you can do it automatically, because the rocket silos are part of the logistics network, which is amazing. So they can actually request from the network, but they seem to only be able to request one item, which I guess is good, but I think they might have sort of opened it up. If you look at the UI here, you can see that there are multiple requesters items or requester slots, but down below it actually says that it can only request one. So I think there might be some work still outstanding on the UI. But I think that makes sense, because if you have multiple things, then you have to also be able to manage that some of the things come in faster, and then how is it going to be, and then you have to sort of pre-allocate slots for something. I think they went like, nah, just build more rocket silos. Each one have a specific purpose. I like that. It's interesting. It's good. It also means that you're going to build bigger instead of trying to cram things into one rocket, which isn't really going to be necessary. And then if you do it automatically, you can set it to automatically launch whenever it has requested from the network, fill it up and send it up. So I think that's a great addition and really interesting mechanic to work on. Like, everything about this is designed towards automation, which is obviously perfect. And then we'll have to work on some of the things like, okay, how do we prevent it from launching if there's no place that it can land, or we probably don't have infinite storage in orbit. So how are we going to manage that we don't sort of launch rockets and then overfill? And what happens if we overfill? Will they just not launch? There are a million small questions, but it's still something that is needed for us to optimize, so that we don't suddenly fill up our orbital cluster with copper and then we don't have all the other things we want. So I think it's super amazing and really interesting to get into. Just a bit weird with the weight. What do you think? Is it good that we add weight, or should we just have X stacks and then adapt a few stack sizes? That would be how I would go. But yeah, I'm happy to jump into something new and more complex. Last thing about this is also what is interesting here is this part where it says you can also set a minimum, so that you don't maybe need to fill up the entire thing, but you can say if it fills up at least this much, then send it off, because you might have some things that you want to get to orbit, but you don't want to wait for it to fill up with the, and again, nuclear power plants or something to that effect. It also says where you want to import it from, which is, I think, is really interesting that you can designate where you want to import it from, but there's only one place that you can import from. So you have to select one origin, one destination. So it looks like you can't have like a many-to-many network, but I don't know. We'll see how that goes. Another interesting thing is when it says players traveling to space, that you can jump into a rocket and go up, but you cannot just, because that would be like the obvious thing would be like, okay, sure, if I can load 1,000 kilos in, then I'm just going to load my inventory with all the heavy stuff and then jump into the rocket and get a freebie to space. But no. You can only travel with your armor and your gun, but not even any ammo. So that's really interesting that they did that. And I think that's a smart move, because otherwise it would just be kind of nullified by just loading up your inventory with junk and then going to orbit anyway. So we have to sort of have logistics rockets to send up stuff we need instead of just carrying it ourselves, because that's kind of how you play in space exploration. You just fill up your inventory and you don't really need to bring a lot of stuff, because you can fill up your inventory with stuff and then build from there, generally. To a certain extent, of course, but this really forces you to make sure that everything is part of a rocket logistics network, which is going to be fun to build. Now, the overall logistics of how you move things between planets. This was something I mentioned last time, where it was explained how you get things to orbit and that the platforms could move between different orbits. But then the question was, how did things get down again? And well, they quite handily explained it with this beautiful diagram. This very explanatory. You have the rockets going to orbit. The platform is then moving to another orbit, and that's interesting, because you would have to pair. The one platform can only have one receiver, but I'm supposing that you can have many different rockets hitting the same platform. And then the question would be, how many platforms do you want? Do you want like small platforms to function as trains? Or do you want like a big platform that functions as a science facility, but you don't want to move it around because that's too expensive to move around? Or how does it work? Do you need more? Do you need one? We don't really know that yet. And that's something we're going to have to figure out. My intuition says that we're going to have a science platform, and then we're going to have smaller platforms that are basically space trains. And that's probably going to be a standardized blueprint. I can't really imagine a world where we don't build a standardized way of making a space train platform blueprint. But it'll be a while, but it's gonna happen. And then the other part was, how do you get things from orbit down? It's not really explained. It does just explain that they have this cargo landing pod that is only one per planet, which is interesting, because I like that, because otherwise you end up just, as they were also describing, you would just end up just going like, oh, I need some copper here, I need some iron here, I need something here, and then you could just basically use it as logistics chests. But that's not how they wanted. They wanted to have like one central hub on a planet, and then everything from there spreads out, maybe into trains, maybe into onto belts, whatever, but it comes from one place. And I think that's great, because it also means that when you land on a planet, you're going to have one hub, and then everything spreads out from there, instead of going like, okay, well, I can just, here's a copper mine, let me build some copper smelting and put another cargo landing pad near that. So I think I like the way that this is done. I don't know, it doesn't say that how it gets from orbit and down, it just says that it's part of the logistics network. So I'm imagining that they sort of get magicked from orbit and down, considering you just basically throw it out of, oh shit, I'm getting into orbital mechanics now. You can't just throw things out of an orbital platform and it won't hit the ground. Never mind, I'm sure that some people in comments will explain orbital mechanics to me. But anyway, I think that it sounds like, since they didn't mention like a rocket that you have to, a drop pod or a capsule or something, and I think that it comes to the planets in a magical way, and you can just access it there. So that's going to be interesting. And then getting it back will of course need another rocket to get it back up to orbit. Really interesting way, and I think this makes sense, and it's going to be complicated to manage, but it's also something that is definitely designed to be managed. It's not just here's some random crap and then you figure it out. No, it's very much like, okay, we're going to have these, and they're going to kind of have a schedule, and then we're going to have some receiving and designing it so that you can have logistics networks interacting with each other. Logistics groups is another big thing. At first, when I read it, I thought this is not necessary, like having solar buildings as something you check on and off. I mean, just either have it in inventory or don't have it in inventory. But I get it now that I'm playing space exploration. I get it, because what you need on the ground and what you need in orbit is vastly different. And when you change between the different layers, you want to sort of leave all the space stuff in space, and you want to leave all the ground stuff on the ground, instead of sort of moving back and forth, especially because we now have the issue that you can't transport things up into orbit. So that means probably when you look at this picture, when it says new group assigned, when you unclick that and you have the trash unrequested, then means it actually clears out your inventory entirely. And that means you can just click that button or uncheck these buttons here, and then your inventory will be cleaned before going up to orbit. I think that's a really amazing way that it can be done. I also think that it's great that you can sort of go, okay, I'm going to go into expansion mode, so give me some miners, some belts, some stuff like that, or I'm going to go for some fighting. Then you maybe uncheck something and you get more ammo, that kind of thing. I think that's great. It's a small change, but I can see that it's definitely necessary when working on different layers and also on different planets. You might have a group that would be landing on a new planet. What do we want? We want 1,000 belts. We want some undergrounds. We want some power poles. We want all the things that you want to sort of bring into a new planet, except you kind of have to put it with rockets. But anyway, we definitely want to have something on the planet and something in orbit, and that's something we have to manage. And I think it's a good addition. It's a small addition. I think also when it comes to quality, will be something that makes it a little more complicated to work with. So it makes sense to have this addition. Although honestly, it's just a mod, right? But they just made it into the core game, which is fine. Now this section, I am not in agreement with. If you know what's up in Factorio, you probably learned that it's not the best idea to spread your logistics network across all your expansions and defensive perimeters. Well, I guess I don't know what's up in Factorio. Because in my world, it's a pretty fucking good idea to have everything in one logistics network, because it's a pain to manage multiple logistics network and make sure that they're not overlapping. And if they've overlapped once, everything is messed up. I don't agree with this, but I'm also playing it a little bit different than what they are intended. I know that they are sort of intending to sort of have long train lines and out and expanding, and then have a little expansion base that does stuff. But it's not the right way to play it. I'm not saying that my way is the right way to play it. Well, I am kind of doing that, but I think I take really offense to the way that they're basically saying that I don't know what's up with Factorio. You know, I think I do. So having resupplied trains like this is they are saying a small bonus on top. I have to agree, it's a very small bonus. This is completely trivial. If you built a setup like this, you are not a rookie when it comes to circuit networks. And oh dear, I need to add uranium bullets instead of piercing ammo instead. Oh no, I make a blueprint and I copy it and I paste it to 5 different locations. That's it. But that's a 1 minute thing that you might have to do 2-3 times in a playthrough. I don't think that's worth putting code in. And I certainly don't think it's worth putting code in and then prefacing it with if you know what's up in the Factorio. So that's a little rant from my side. I don't know. What do you think? Is it, am I completely off? Do you have like many separate networks and manage them like this? Or do you have like one big old network? And yes, of course, there are disadvantages to having one big network. There are some things that take a long time to build, to get, but I generally, only in my 10,000 signs per minute base was it ever a problem. And that's not how most people play. Let's take a little look at the 383, the Superforce building. Not the greatest name, but I guess they kind of have to call it that because they were force building before. And this is a great feature. It's a small feature from a user perspective, but it's going to change a lot in how we work on things. So basically, it works in the way that usually you could not. I mean, back in the good old days, you couldn't stamp a blueprint if there was anything in the way. So they added the shift button so you could force it in, and it would sort of deconstruct the trees and stones and stuff like that. But it was still a problem that there was a power pole or something, and you kind of had to clean all of that out and stamp it down. Or there was missing landfill and you couldn't put it down. So you had to have like landfill blueprints that you could sort of stamp down and then stamp the city block on top. It's a little bit annoying, but it was just something we had to work with. But this way, where you can actually just super force it and then it will automatically build landfill underneath or spade flat platform is great. I think that's the funny thing is, like, when they introduce it, you go like, of course, that makes so much sense. And now they added, notice on this animation that there is one little water pit hole in this, which is absolutely atrocious. And it's something that's going to annoy me. That right below the power pole, there's a little water pond. And so you walk around and you get your feet wet. And it's just annoying, right? I don't think I would. I don't know if I would. I'm probably going to use this feature, of course, but I would probably also fill those in afterwards. I think it's a great feature. It's super amazing and really nice, particularly when it comes to orbital things, because there is much more valuable. If you see here, you're going to be doing this a lot, and then you can expand because you can't run around building it yourself. So just doing this, and then it expands outwards and starts working on it. So super good addition. I really like it. But it gets better than that. It's not just about adding water landfill or space platform underneath. It's also just simply steamroll over whatever you build. This is cool, but it's gonna ruin so many things. It's gonna go wrong more than it goes right. You can just see this particular example of how it just removes the power pole. Suddenly you don't have things powered. And I think that's going to happen a lot of times. You just stamp things on top, and then somehow some belt that was crossing will intersect with another, and then they'll sort of interact in a weird and unintended way, or power poles missing or stuff like that. But it's great to have it, and I'm sure we're going to need it, particularly useful when it comes to city block builds, because you can then sort of stamp down and then stamp something on top of the city blocks. For example, sometimes I have the inner power poles in a city block. I need to replace those, so I can just stamp my blueprint on top and it would automatically remove the power poles and build whatever else instead. So I think that's a great addition and something that's really nice little convenience feature. So I can't say how many times I have done this specific thing. Oh, I need a power pole, put it in, but then it's gotten sort of into muscle memory of just click, remove, put the substation, underground. And I never really thought about it as being, oh, that would be nice if this was automated, but it actually is. It can be automated. And I think that's really, really cool thing, and something that's just really convenient, like putting beacons into builds. So nice suddenly. Again, it's probably going to mess up some things here and there if you don't prepare for it in advance, but roboports, beacons, power poles, not a radar. No, don't build a radar there. All of these things, they're neat, but I'm also just thinking, if you're doing this thing, it's because you haven't really planned ahead. And I don't think this is going to be so useful if you're actually planning ahead. But it's going to be super useful if you are not planning ahead. So I think this is going to be extremely valuable for spaghetti bases and for noobs, where they can just go like, oh, I'm missing a power pole, stamp it down here. Or I'm missing a roboport. But I think it's nice. Don't get me wrong. I don't really want to rely on this too much. I'd like to be still planning ahead and making room for radars not there in future builds. But I'm sure that's going to be handy, particularly maybe with trains, where you have an intersection or you have like a straight line and you can replace something on top. It'll remove the signals and put the right signals in instead. If you want to change from a change signal to a normal signal, that kind of thing. I think it's definitely going to be a lot of use cases that are super valuable. And it's a very exciting new feature. Of course, it's not like, oh my God, I'm going to buy the DLC just for this. But it just shows that they have been playing the game a lot. They've been working a lot on the game, and they are sort of looking at a lot of convenience things that they want to fix. So super exciting. I think that with the latest updates here, things are sort of starting to piece together, and we can see the picture of, okay, what is the vision they're trying to achieve? There are probably going to be tons of more stuff. For example, biters. We haven't heard anything about their intention about biters, but for now, the quality, the rocket, the logistics, like they all fit together really nice. So really excited. Unfortunately, still almost a year, not almost, definitely probably a year before we see anything for real. But time to get excited is now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this rather lengthy analysis video. Leave a comment below if there's something you thought was missing, if there's something you are curious about. And of course, remember that I'm playing space exploration. It's not the expansion, but it's inspiration for the expansion. Let's just say it like that. Playing that on Twitch on Wednesdays and Sundays. So come on over to twitch.tv/Nilaus at 8 p.m. Central European Time. I'm also making a YouTube Let's Play here on YouTube with a video every week on the progress. So thank you for watching. Until next time, take care and stay effective.